ladies and gentlemen, and the department, Dr. Vilagazi, thank you for coming back. Kosatu, we are here, you are welcome. And there's the third person who's supposed to present. I'm not sure why is she not here, or she's on visual. Huh? Yes. Oh, okay. I declare this meeting officially open. Honorable members, on Saturday in Gauteng, we experienced the earthquake and everybody was scared. My son was scared also. And I said to him, "You're scared to die."
Recording in progress.
Yeah, Kosana was very scared. And I saw it on the news because it happened mostly in the whole of Gauteng. So Honorable Sheriff didn't hear it. She was fast asleep. So she can die peacefully. But thank you very much, honorable members. That was on a lighter note, but on a serious note, that the earthquake happened in Gauteng. And it was there all over the news yesterday. And I think all of you saw it. You are all welcome, honorable members and our guests. Last week, we adjourned our meeting to go and present our reports in the chamber. And we came back to continue with our work. And we have promised those organizations that did not finish their presentation, as per the request also of Dr. Vilagazi, that she needed more time to go and put in some other things in their submission. We have agreed as the committee that we'll extend our meetings for this week, and we have honored what we promised. And we also acknowledge the presence of the department because they were here. And I thought that, so you guys, you'll forget that we're coming back today. But thank you very much for coming. And Kosatu is here. And because we were worried that you need to also to be given an opportunity to come make your own your submission. Ms. N. Kosana, I'm told, call to action. Organization is here. Are you here, Ms. Kosana? She will join at 10:30. Oh, okay. So everybody is here. I have granted permission to other members to be on visual. Honorable Piri is on visual. Honorable Boni, she's also on visual. She's staying in Northern Cape. So she has formed part of other organizational things that are happening in the Northern Cape. Honorable Masondo, she called the chair, and I also granted her permission to be on visual. So there's no other member that. And Nomsa Machesi, she also called the chair yesterday that she will join on visual. With the reasons that she gave me, I have granted her permission to be on visual. But I don't see her on visual now. What is happening? Yeah. Honorable Hlengwa, I'm not sure why she's not here. Was she here last week? So IFP did not participate. Honorable Sonti, she's not here. Even last week, she was not here. So the EFF must not say we did not inform their members. Mam Kaula is here, and she was here last week. Thank you very much to our staff members. And Ms. Landu, you did send out our statement. Angisho. Hey, kusho ukuthi ngiyaqabana nawe ngoba mina ngikuphendulile. Hayi, ngiphendulile mina. It's true. Ngikuphendulile. And then, but it's okay. If you didn't send it out, you will send it out today because this is the final. Kashifa, where's the plug? Where's the plug, Baba? We need a plug. Where's the IT? Yeah. Plug.
The adapter. Can you borrow us one?
Yeah? Okay. So, with all those members that are on visual, I'm still waiting for Nomsa. If she's able to join us.
No, 18.
Oh, okay. So we can start with our meeting, honorable members. We are forming a quorum. I declare this meeting officially open. We'll then move to the next item, which is a presentation from Dr. Vilagazi. We thought that at least you had enough time to mobilize your colleagues so that you can prepare enough.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee. We really appreciate this opportunity to come back once again in this forum and share our thoughts as the Gender Equity Unit of the University of the Western Cape. We humbly appreciate this opportunity, Honorable Chairperson. I am going to share my presentation also on the Zoom platform. We've just added a couple of slides, Honorable Chairperson, after the conversation that we had the other day. And today is really focused on the technicalities, that we have identified in relation to the bill. Mainly because we also know that we have only 15 minutes to do this for today. So just to reiterate, honorable members and the honorable chairperson, that our position remains that the bill as it stands and proposed be tagged as section 76. So just to reiterate that position, we also recommend the inclusion of the Department of Higher Education and Training for reasons that we had stated the other day, because universities in South Africa have a mandate that is linked directly to DHET, and DHET has a framework on ending gender-based violence and femicide, which emanates from the NSP, GBVF, and we see ourselves there in the Department of Basic Education and the National Prosecution Authority, as indicated last week. What we are also submitting, Honorable Chairperson and committee, is that the bill does require a preamble, that spells out the state of GBVF pandemic in South Africa, and which notes also legislative and policy frameworks and treaty bodies that inform the regulation of GBVF. You know, that South Africa as a country is party to at international, regional, continental, and sub-regional levels globally. Some of those are including CEDAW, the UN Resolution on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Maputo Protocol on the Rights of Women in Africa, Resolution 275 of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights that is related to ending violence on the grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics. We also think that the SADC Gender Protocol should form part of the preamble, amongst many others, Honorable Chairperson, that relate to the right of children and people with disabilities. In terms of the sections of the bill, what we're also proposing around definitions, Honorable Chairperson, is perhaps the amendment of some of the definitions. We identified 3 of them. One is that of civil society. The second one is gender-based violence, and the third one is femicide. Our proposal is that we include the word academia as part of civil society so that the section reads as follows. Definition: civil society includes non-governmental organizations, labor, private sector, and then we include the word academia, and then other structures and institutions, mainly because, you know, then it means academia is spelled out and the role of universities, TVET colleges, or the post-school education sector becomes clearer in the bill. If we do not do that, Chairperson, as an alternative bill, we are suggesting that we can include rather a new definition that is called public sphere, which is generally conceived as a social space in which different opinions are expressed in society. Problems of general concern are discussed, as it is the problem of GBVF, and collective solutions are derived communicatively. So if we can include academia in the definition.
Sorry, to interrupt.
No problem.
Actually, I'm a member of this parliament. Fanele ngabe ngine-interpreter la. Uyisendela yini phan uthe uzongena kwi-Zoom, so mangithi ngiyapressa la ayikho la. Uze ngizwe kahle ukuthi kukhulunywa ngani. Thanks.
Sorry, Ma'am Kaula, thank you very much. Oops.
Chair, he said he wasn't aware that it was going to be physical. He thought it was going to be on Zoom, so he asked for a link. I think there was a miscommunication between him and his manager, but also I sent a notice yesterday to him, Chair, to say the meeting is going to be here at M46. But I've spoken to Mr. Ntuli and he's sorting it out. Because he said he must come, even if he's going to be late. So I'll make a follow-up with Mr. Ntuli, the section manager, language section.
So where is he now?
I'll have to check with Mr. Ntuli, Chair. Because he said he was going to speak to him.
Asimeni kancane ke Dr. Willa, asimeni kancane simlinde.
Siyabonga, Chair.
Sibone ukuthi kwenzakalani.
Akunankinga, sixolise bandla kumama uKhaula.
And the chair, ngiyacela ngemvume yakho. Uzoyithatha lento ngiyise phambili because mina lento yama language sayilwela la eSouth Africa. I don't know why kubonakala ukuthi ama language ethu kufanele asale ngemuva every time. Even ezintweni ezithinta abanye lento esikhuluma ngala ibucayi. Abantu bafuneka bayazi because abantu eqinisweni aba-affectekayo lezi zinto esikhuluma ngazo la abantu bakithi abamnyama. Ngiyabonga, Chair. Thanks.
In fact, Ma'am Kaula, you are not wrong. It is within your right. And for the benefit of our people that we do have interpreters, because in South Africa, we recognize 11 languages. So there's no way that every time when we sit in a meeting, we're being disorganized by that unit that must get interpreters for our members. Kodwa ke sizosokola la siya khona le ngaphandle ngoba khona abatholanga abantu besiZulu. Kodwa ke
Oh, Chair, ngifuna ukuhlonipha nje. Uyabona sengihambe ama-country, ngibuya eRussia. Angazi ngabala ngithini. Kukhulunywa ama-language abo. But ila kuphela eSouth Africa. Kanti yes, we know ukuthi la eSouth Africa vele sihlukene ngama-language. Ingakho sina 11 language. Kodwa la ama-language ethu thina abantu abamnyama afakwa nje angazi yini inkinga yawo. Kodwa lana sithi thina wonke ama-language avumelekile. Kodwa mawuthi uyalalela nje, no. Thina abamnyama sikhombisa ukuthi thina asikho proud. Si proud ngoba siyakubantu siyocela amavoti. Ukuthi sesikhuluma ngani no. Ilento ngaphesheya angiba blame kakhulu because indawo yabo. South Africa la ufuneka kwaziwe khona ukuthi kufanele. Kodwa nakhona ngithi ikhona sinama ambassador ngale. Ufuneka azi ukuthi South Africa la. Ngiyabonga Chair.
our apologies, Honorable Kaula, for that problem. Yema interpreters that are supposed to be here on time so that you are able to do your work effectively. It's just a disorganization. But what we are going to do is the committee will write to the head of that unit so that you are not being sabotaged. For me, this is a sabotage more than anything because our staff members have notified them earlier that you are having this meeting. In fact, the guy who was here or last week, he knew that we are continuing with our meeting this week. So our apologies on behalf of the committee. Over to you, Dr. Vilakazi.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu Chair. Angazi noma ngiqale phansi ngoba ngingakhuluma
Qala phansi.
ngesiZulu. I
Qala
think
phansi.
all right. Siyabonga kakhulu Chairperson, sibingelele bandla kwindlu yonke ama honorable members akhona phakathi kwendawo no Chairperson
No,
ngokusinika
no, Chair,
ithuba.
Sorute ngamdisturb, akaqhubeke. Mina la, I'm practicing my rights. Angiyazi, sengisho ukuthi kungabe sekusafarisha abantu abaningi yebo lo nto ngisho.
Siyabonga Mam Kaula ngemvume yakho. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Once again, sizoqhubeka ke ngaleyo ndlela. Honorable Chairperson, what we were proposing is that i-bill le if I go under section 76, isuse ku section 75, and we are also asking a preamble that the preamble needs to also reference ama documents esiwasayinile umthetho sisekelo internationally, globally, sub-regionally, njenge CEDAW, UN resolution on sexual orientation and gender identity, iMaputo protocol on the rights of women in Africa, or resolution 275 wasayinwa i-African Commission on Human and People's Rights, ngamalungelo wabantu abathandana ngokobulili obufanayo, nabantu abanezicu ezahlukahlukene. NESADC protocol, amongst many others that relate to the rights of children and people with disabilities. We also are asking, proposing changes to some of the definitions. As indicated, in definition of civil society, section 1, we are proposing ukuthi sifake igama elithi academia in that definition, to read as follows: civil society to include non-governmental organizations, labor, private sector, and then we include the word academia. We've highlighted all the suggestions that we are making in red in the submission. And we also then are saying, if it is not possible to have that word academia included into the definition of civil society, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, singafaka enye definition entsha of what we are calling the public sphere, a new definition which is generally conceived as a social space in which different opinions are expressed, problems of general concern are discussed, and collective solutions are derived communicatively. Yindawo le abantu emphakathini abahlangana kuyona inhlangano ngeinhlangano no business kanjalo angene ukuqoqa izinto ezisiphatha kabi emphakathini noma izinto esifisa ukuthi singazilungisa. And so the world of academia can then be taken to form part of what we are calling the public sphere. If it is seen not to be neatly and philosophically identified as part of what we are currently understanding as a civil society. So in this case, then section 3A of the bill would need to also change in our proposal, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, to read as follows: the members referred to in subsection 1A must be appointed in a manner ensuring participation of civil society and the public sphere if it becomes two definitions. But should academia be included under the title of civil society, then that insertion would not be necessary. Definition number 2, esiyicelayo ukuthi ishintshe gender-based violence under section 1B. Currently, it does not include spiritual violence, we are proposing that this definition should include spiritual violence. Recently, as we know, honorable members and honorable chairperson and fellow South Africans, we had an amendment of the Domestic Violence Act in 2021, and the definition of gender-based violence in the amended Domestic Violence Act of 2021 includes spiritual violence. So we are suggesting that in this bill as well, we read gender-based violence to mean gender-associated violence, which includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, economic, spiritual, educational, and psychological abuse. So we are inserting the word spiritual in the definition. Thirdly, honorable chairperson and honorable members, we are proposing the definition of femicide to include the word, the phrase, and expression, to read as follows. Femicide means the killing of a female person or perceived female person on the basis of gender identity and expression. So we are inserting that phrase that says and expression, whether committed by a person within a domestic relationship, that one will continue as it is, for a simple reason, honorable chairperson, that we know that trans identifying individuals, gender non-conforming individuals, and people with varied sex characteristics continue to experience violence on the grounds of expression. And then we're moving to section 6 in terms of the board. What we are proposing with section 6, gender units or transformation offices or inclusion and diversity units within universities, 26 universities of South Africa, to be part of the board together with DHET, NPA, as we indicated, perhaps CGE. Then we rewrite section 6 as follows. This is where we are proposing most of the amendments. That section 6(1) where 2 will then say the board will consist of 38 members instead of the proposed. I think in the bill currently it says not more than 13, if I'm not mistaken. Then what would mean then is that section 6(1)(a) would then say, instead of saying 7 persons from civil society organizations, it will say 9 persons who come from all 9 provinces of South Africa, so that we have that geographical spread. We are then saying section 1(b) should say 9 persons from gender equity and or transformation units in academic institutions who come from all 9 provinces of South Africa. I just want to share again, sorry, the network has just left there, it is unstable. So who come from all 9 provinces of South Africa, and that was not there before. So we are inserting section 1(b). Then we are just amending as we go along. And then the others will be section 1(c), which then talks about representation from each of the following organs of state. We are happy with what we see there. We're just suggesting again, DHET, Basic Education, National Prosecution Authority, CGE to be included there. But we are also proposing an insertion of 3 members from the community. Honorable Chairperson, for a simple reason that siyazi ukuthi-ke ukulentuzana ukuhlukunyezwa kwenzeka kuma-communities esikhathini esiningi. We do have individuals and influential people who don't belong to civil society organizations and NGOs. And we are seeing a troubling culture of violences that are emerging through NGOism and CSOism that sometimes excludes ordinary members of society who are being killed on a daily basis on our pavements. So we're proposing then that we need to have communities represented themselves in their own voice there. An insertion again is that of conveners of each pillar of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. Honorable Chairperson, for a simple reason, the job of this council is to make sure that the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is implemented successfully. I think it will be a grave omission if we don't get pillars who are leading currently, conveners who are leading all the 7 pillars, the NSP, to be part of the deliberations of the council. So we propose that each convener of each pillar be then added as part of the board. And then what we do with the executive, we then have an executive board that constitutes not more than 15, comprised of 1 of each categories as outlined under section, it will be section C in this case, with the chairperson and deputy chairperson as stipulated under subsection 6, who would have been appointed by the minister. Sorry, my network is just moving slow in terms of moving the slide. And then Chairperson, we are also then saying in the section that talks, section 22, about the arrangements at provincial and local level. The current bill talks about developing provincial and local working groups. Our assertion and our proposal is that we use a district-based model in this particular case that replicates section 6 in the constitution of provincial and working groups, whichever name that we give them, such that what we have read under section 6 becomes then also section 22. However, the proposal that we are suggesting is that the powers that are given to the minister in terms of section 6 be given then to the premier at provincial level in terms of section 22 and be given to a mayor if you're using a district-based model at a local district municipality. And then the composition will be the same. You would still then have 9 persons from civil society organizations. In this particular case, they will come from that particular province, and 1 person from an institution of higher learning in that province, and 1 rep in terms of the government departments that are suggested there. And of course, 3 members of the community and 1 convener of the pillar. What we are then suggesting here, Honorable Chairperson, is that the same will apply at provincial level and at district municipality level using a district-based model, that you would still have an executive committee of 15 people. At province, the premier obviously will be the political head, and at district level municipality, the mayor will be the district head. Section 6.2, what in terms of appointment of the board, we just feel like there's something about the powers of the minister there that may require the attention of the committee. Our proposal is that the powers that are given to the minister, and would argue the same for the premier and the mayor, be relaxed a bit to enable autonomy of the minister, of the premier, and of the mayor in appointing board members, to avoid some of the glitches that sometimes can stifle decisive leadership when it comes to issues of delivery because of hefty bureaucratic processes, because the minister is expected to consult all those, the government, cabinet members from the stated government departments. And it can blur the lines of accountability, because the minister may say, I was not able to do A, B, C, and D because SAPS was not in the meeting, or the NPA was not in the meeting, and so on. But if you relax the powers of the minister, it may fast-track delivery and perhaps clarify a redundancy that sometimes can result because of bureaucratic processes. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, we are proposing ex officio members from other councils and public entities for a simple reason that some of the councils that we have, would have to be sister councils to this council, and also have some element of touching on work of GBVF and gender-related work. And these councils are in any case governed by, PFMA, they are the public entities, and so on. So it would be councils like SANEC, the South African National AIDS Council, the current interim Traditional Health Practitioners Council of South Africa, iy'ngane zethu ziyabulawa emaphehlweni, ziyadlwengulwa abantu in the name of spirituality. Health Professions Council, medical doctors obviously have a very clear role there. The Allied Health Professions Council as well, in terms of dealing with GBVF issues that are sitting within those practices. And of course, other public entities like SARS, SASA. We know in the Bayama grants, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, Zabantwana, Mama, and so on, and the role of parenting and violences that sit within that system. And South African tourism, because of issues of human trafficking, of bodies and of women and children, but also the veterinary council. Ngoba isebenza ngezilwane bakwethu, sometimes ke siyayisibona ukuthi abantu bayalaliswa nezilwane bahlukunyezwa abantu kube kubi. So when we have these councils as ex-official members, they don't need to have voting status, but they play a very crucial advisory role to this council of ours that we are proposing. And we see that that expertise would really benefit council. And lastly, Honorable Chairperson, we are grateful for the time, and we are saying we are going to this conference called Community of Practice on the 29th and 30th of June. We are requesting to send further research, because that conference will be talking about gender-based violence within the 26 universities of South Africa, research that we have done within the experiences of students, those of staff within our universities. We are happy to share what comes out of that conference as research that has been done. So we would be happy to be given an opportunity after this conference beyond the 30th to submit that to the honorable committee. Thank you once again. Siyabonga kakhulu bakwethu, siyathokoza chairperson womusa wako ne committee. Makube kuhle.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koza Vilakazi. You know, I was reading number 9. Number 9 says, the minister may co-opt any person at the request of the board to assist the board with regards to its functions in order to advise and provide the necessary expertise in their specific field or represent a relevant stakeholder. So, you know, I was reading what you are proposing. It excited me, but I'm thinking, because I want to read it in line with number 9, that do you think it's not covered that way? And do you want us to be specific in terms of what you're proposing? Because maybe the way it's captured, maybe it won't do what you think it must do. But if it's like that, it's like it's open. Yeah, but when we put specifics, then it will assist, because you are giving us a clear guide on how must then it be captured. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. No, you are so correct. Then I think what we were thinking is that it can be read with section 9. So in a way that the councils that we are suggesting as ex officios are not limited to the number that we are saying, but it needs to be read with section 9 to say any other, should those not be sufficient, you know, at the discretion of council or the minister. As the need arise, we know that when we're doing this work, sometimes it requires different expertise from time to time that may not be covered by the constitution of the current arrangement. In that case, section 9 stands. You know, but that in section 6, we'll be more deliberate in saying who become the ex officios, and that is where we are proposing this insertion under section 6. But it doesn't do away with section 9, where you're saying then should there be a need for expertise or further, you know, guidance and advice to the council or the minister may then co-opt or bring in and call in others.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vilakazi. Department, what's your take?
Thank you, Chairperson. Our impression, just like you, when she made the input, what came into mind, it is that clause that actually was specifically drafted to cater for other experts that might assist in the work of the council. Because the main issue is that the limit is actually in terms of the NSP that states that the council must consist of 13 members. As you can see, at first we even had the CEO. Actually, the very first draft that was submitted to the state law advisor, it had all the other departments that everyone is proposing, Department of Basic Education and others, and higher education. But we were reminded of the NSP, which is the founding document of the bill, that the NSP limits the number to 13. So on that basis, we had to come up with a clause that says, that gives the minister the powers to co-opt ex officio members as and when the need arises. So let's say the minister requires the expertise of the Department of Higher Education. She will have the powers to co-opt any member from the Department of Higher Education, maybe to provide advice, give guidance, or provide a report on whatever subject is being addressed during that particular time. So clause 9 was drafted specifically to address the limitation that is imposed by the NSP to 13 members of the board. So we are bound by this 13. Like I'm saying, our first draft, it had a number that exceeds 13, but we were actually reminded that your founding document limits you to 13. Therefore, then we came up with a clause that says, when the need arises, the minister will have the powers to co-opt any stakeholder, depending on the need at that particular time.
According to what they are proposing the stakeholders that they listed, that they should sit in all meetings of the board. If I've captured good Dr. Vilakazi correct, but they must not have voting powers. And yours, it says the minister can co-opt, but in terms of co-option, it does not prescribe how many people can the minister co-opt. Yeah, but Bona, they have gone to detail to say they feel that it's important that the following stakeholders that they have named or listed must form part without voting powers. And maybe as the committee, when we're dealing with it, we'll need to digest and see how can we then see how can we fit it in, because I'm thinking now that in fact what you were raising in terms of other departments not being part, like Department of Education, as you are saying, but they were supposed to be part of the council, and Nina, we are being restrained by what the NSP is saying. But I think as the committee, we're not restrained by what you have done as a department. But sorry. So now it brings to my now it brings to my iPad. Hey, sorry for that. Yeah, so maybe this is something that you need to look at as honorable members, because we are going to have our own time to deliberate on the inputs that we are making as organizations. But thank you very much. Give me, it does make sense a little bit, but we'll look at it, whether we could take it the way you're proposing or we go according to what the department is saying. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Honorable Sheriff.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. Vilakazi, between 30 and 38 people on a board seems bloated to me. I'll be very honest with you, because then we have to then take into account the financial implications of having 38 people on a board. That means 38 people need to be remunerated through state funds in order for it to, in fact, instead of a board, it sounds like another institution coming together. So in my opinion, it does feel bloated, especially when it comes to the financial implications of how much money government will be spending based on remuneration, or for those departments. based on
Honorable
such
Sheriff,
subsidies.
my understanding is that this council, they are not going to be remunerated.
They are, Chair, it's under section 10 of the bill,
Let me read it.
page
Let-
number 6. Chair, can I continue while you do that? Cool, thank you. Section 10, remuneration of members. Dr. Vilakazi, when you speak about the section 76, and a lot of submissions have been around the tagging of the bill. I went back and I looked at the bill in pages 14 and pages 15, actually explain the reason why it is tagged as a section 75 bill. I then went back to the Constitution to look at Schedule 4, where it outlines what exactly will need to, in order for it to be a section 76, it has to meet the criteria in Schedule 4, which is very focused on service delivery and service delivery implementation. And so when we as the committee, after all of these submissions, when we go back, we will have to look at not necessarily the outputs of the council, but more the structure of the council. And I think this is where the debate of the tagging comes in, because even if it's tagged as a section 75, in my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that even though it's a section 75 tag, does it mean that the board will not work within provinces, or it won't work with the NCOP or other provincial departments or municipal departments for that matter? The board has to be able to trickle down into communities, or else it's just a waste of time. So maybe you can speak me through the tagging and how you understand it, so that I can understand it a little bit better, because when I read it with the Constitution, section 75 makes sense. So I'll put that one back to you, Dr. Vilakazi. In terms of the CGE being part of the board, I am a little bit uncomfortable with this, because the CGE is a Chapter 9 institution. That role is an oversight role. If the CGE is on the board of the council, you can't be the referee and a player at the same time. So we need to also find a balance between oversight, accountability, and being part of the board. So that's just my comment on that. When you spoke about higher education, I didn't hear you mentioning TVEDs. So how will TVEDs form part of this process? I also wanted to speak about, you mentioned 9 academic members from province. The list can go on, Dr. Vilakazi. We can then say we need 9 people from every province from the private sector. We need 9 people from every province from this sector, from that sector, from this sector. Where does it start? Where does it end? And I think this is that's what makes our job difficult, Chair, as the portfolio committee, is finding the lines and where they need to be drawn in terms of course, Dr. Vilakazi, we want as many people to be part of this process, but we also have to look at the reality. And can you imagine a 50-member board council? It gives me anxiety if I have to think about it that big. And then, Chair, when you mentioned around section 6 with the relaxing of ministers in terms of co-option and appointing people on the board, do you perhaps think that instead of the minister doing the appointment, it should be given to the portfolio committee to do the appointment, just like we do for the CGE and the NYDA? Is that what you meant by relaxing powers, just so that I can understand it a bit better? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and members, for those questions and comments. In terms of section 76 tagging, our assertion is that
Chair, excuse me, I also raised my hand. It's Nomsa on the virtual. Can you recognize me, please?
okay. Thank you so much, Chair. So in terms of Section 76, the reasoning behind that, Honorable Chair, honorable members, is that once you tag the bill as Section 76, it automatically kicks in a public participation process within provinces that enables communities to participate effectively in the passing of this bill when it becomes an act. But Section 75 does not make that provision easier, because provinces don't really necessarily have the leeway that they would have under Section 76 to take this bill into the National Council of Provinces, and of course then be able to have deliberations and public hearings within public halls and so on, so that abantu bazikhulumele ngokwabo about what they would like to see this council looking like. So that was our major concern, and the fact that many of us had not had an opportunity to engage with this bill at the level when it was still within the department. And now that it is within the portfolio committee, we are beginning to voice out. But it is not easy, honorable members and chairperson and honorable chairperson, when you think about issues of traveling, issues of resources, issues of poverty, indaba ye-accessibility, nendaba ye-data, abantu abaningi abakwazi ukungena kulama platforms njengoba sikhuluma nje. So many voices are left out. But if you then take it as Section 76, honorable member, you're ensuring ukuthi abantu abakwazi ukuhamba ngeenyawo bafike holweni, bayo participator can do that easily without any limitations of data and traveling costs of coming to Parliament in Cape Town. So that is the deepest concern that we're having around Section 76. And decentralization of power as well is one of the things that we looked at. Yes, we can have a national council, but it is very, very rare that you find national structures reaching down to people on the ground. So, and you find that power is highly centralized. But if you then take it as Section 76, it enables the premiers, it enables perhaps even the mayors and the mayoral committees to be able to prioritize service delivery in line with the objectives of the Act once it becomes an Act, and in line with the objectives of NSP. In that way, you are having district municipalities and provincial legislatures contributing decisively in terms of their budgets, in terms of service delivery directly in clinics, in communities, in SASA, and everything that we do that is relating to ending and reducing gender-based violence and femicide. So Section 76 gives those kinds of possibilities which you really find really under Section 75, and that was our assertion. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, in terms of PFMA and the payment members of the board, the reason why we're suggesting we are not taking away the possibility of a smaller executive committee, which is what NSP in our understanding is calling for, to say you don't want a bloated leadership structure that won't be able to deliver. So we are still saying in this case, probably 13 or 15 the most, but not more than that, can be the executive committee that is comprised of one of each of the categories that we are proposing, mainly because the executive committee has then that ability to make sure that work flows faster without the limitations of a bloated structure. But where you see then the benefit of ex officios, should this become a part of the Act, is within the committees of the council, because the committees as proposed now, honorable member, are meant to be constituted by members of council. But if you only have 13 members, it means then that you are likely to have committees that are less capacitated in terms of ensuring that they advise. You are looking at risk and audit committee, for example. You may need a committee on disciplinary action to make sure that perpetrators of violence are followed up and so on. You may need experts also in terms of just interpretation of law and the statutes that we have around punishment, around a range of things, right? But if you have 13 members, you are likely then to have 13 members that are overstretched, in terms of capacity, who have to find themselves flying in between provinces. Again, there's a cost there that is layered in any case. So why not rather decentralize that power to ex officio members who will dedicate their time to serve those committees decisively, with commitment, with availability of time, and oftentimes not even need to travel because they'll be based in their provinces and in their district municipalities. So that was the thinking behind Honorable Member and Honorable Chair. And in relation to relaxation of powers, it is exactly that we are suggesting that let us not centralize power too much higher. You know, the more decentralization of power, the better. Perhaps the minister can even delegate this responsibility to the portfolio committee to ensure that the appointment of board members is not a function that takes forever, especially where there's resignations or people perhaps are fired from the board for one reason or the other. Then it doesn't take months to replace because the minister needs to consult SAPS, needs to consult APA and so on. It's just bureaucratically heavy. It is hefty, and our concern is that that kind of bureaucracy can sometimes cause redundancy in terms of delivery. But if there's delegation and relaxation, the minister can easily do those dance and say, portfolio committee, can you replace that member? As we are doing with CGE, honorable member. I think that is where we come from, but also then is able to do the same with the premier, and perhaps with the mayors, so that there is that delegation of power, and we decentralize as much as possible at the interest of service delivery. Because the main concern here is to say, South Africa is known as a country that we are very, very good in formulating these kinds of legislations. This one is not going to be the first type of a structure that we put in place legally. Neither is it going to be the first piece of law that we put in place around ending gender-based violence and femicide. Our biggest challenge has been implementation. And I think that the remuneration section 10 does not even talk about salaries. It talks about reimbursements, that kind of thing. So it's not even a salary. I don't think that in terms of the budget that we're looking for this work, it can be a huge amount of money. People are going to claim for hours that they've worked for. So it's actually a remuneration based on delivery, on-time delivery, presence. Is not a person sitting in their boardroom for a period of a month and claiming a salary at the end of the day, which I think is a very good provision in that it is sensitive to having members of council that may be bloated and just earning salaries and not doing the work. But you actually are going to be reimbursed on the grounds of saying, I have gone to court, or I have contributed towards taking Ukoko to a home when she needed it, or a child that has been raped or mutilated. So in that sense, honorable member, we are seeing that section 10 around PFMA is protected, but you're also giving capacity, because you don't want a council that has got no tooth or teeth to be able to do the work. At the same time, you don't want to overbloat it in such a way that it doesn't deliver. And that suggestion is then given to say, let us make sure the executive committee remains as small as possible, as provided for in the NSP. Honorable Chair, I have already taken much of the time, and I can stop it here, but I can also go on. TVET colleges, sorry, honorable member. TVET colleges are included in our proposal. We make reference to universities, I think mainly because I come from the gender equity unit, and the COPS is included mostly of universities, but we are saying post-school education sector, which includes TVET colleges and any form of education that happens post-school, so that that representation is also enabled. So where we are saying necessarily universities, it can be read to say post-school sector. So in some instances, it may be a TVET college, in some instances, maybe university, as the province decides who should represent from time to time. Thank you so much.
Honorable Machesi.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Vilakazi, for your presentation, Yako. I just want to find out, because I'm also going back to what Honorable Sharif mentioned regarding the members that have to be represented and be part of the board, because it's a bit confusing, what you're trying to get to. At the same time, I just need clarity, or maybe even make a suggestion as well. When you mentioned something that the minister as well should have a representative within the council. Remember, coming from education university sectors, you can what I have seen personally is that within their councils they will have a representatives of the minister, which actually take a big chunk of the seats within the council itself. And it has posed a lot of problems throughout the different universities, because then the universities, they lose that
Cold
autonomy.
here. Sorry, Machetsi, it's cold, man.
So can you hear me? Chair,
We can hear you. The chair says, please continue.
okay, so my issue is that, what we have seen, that when there is ministers within, like people that are elected by the minister to be part of a council, there usually becomes an interference, and then therefore they lose their autonomy. So I'm a little bit concerned about the suggestions that you've made, that the university, the minister must also have representatives within the council. I just want to find out what is your view regarding that, because for me, it's always has caused it's causing a lot of problems within different institutions. And also, going to the fact that the board members have also to be remunerated, like they have to receive salaries. That also puts a financial strain on the government itself. How about, because I suggested that last week, that maybe we have more of interministerial council that is composed of different members from the different portfolios that are work in relations with the Department of Women, which will be for somebody from the Ministry of Police, the Ministry of Social Development, Basic Education, etc., coming directly from those departments and then making up a council, so that you don't have to have financial you don't have to incur any finances in terms of funding and also paying them, because they will already be having salaries from the different departments. I just want to find out what will your view based on that, if we were to have an interministerial kind of council, instead of having people from outside that needs to be remunerated, and also that obviously will have to have funding for it. And the reason why I'm saying that, already CGE and the department, they are also funded, and also the funding is very little. So to have a council that's going to come in and also be funded, and now you're saying that you're thinking that it should be a bigger council, so that means now you're talking about funds that are already not there, because the government keeps on saying that they don't have funds for this department and also for CGE. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, Acting Chair. No, ngizoqala lana nje. Angibonge kwi-presentation yakho, Dr. Vilakazi. Izinto zakho ozibalulayo, kimina ngizibona zidingeka and zibalulekile kakhulu. If uchaza nokubheka, ngizokhuluma nje ngo-section 76 no 75, lo kuya emphakathini kubantu khona lana engithi mangithi khona ngithi angivumelane nawe, because khona indawo lana otholi njengoba sihlangene la abasizwa ngokwama network, abanye nje basemakhaya, abanye abanawo ngisho ama-radio noma TV. La mhlambe bekuzothi makuthiwa siye kuma-hall kuzomenyezelwa bafika abantu silalele inkinga zabo siphinde futhi mase silalelile bese sikwazi ukubheka ukuthi okay masibuya siza la nakho kufanele sikwenze nalokhu nalokhu yayizwa lonto sisuka kubantu phansi nothi thina siqhamuke phezulu siye phansi khona la uthinta khona kwama spiritual ngiyayithanda le nto because if mawuthi uyabheka isikhathi samanje angazi noma sekuyanaba kuma province ama spiritual angithi sikhuluma ngemimoya izangoma izinyanga ngicabanga ukuthi zonke lezo zinto kuyafuneka siye phansi siyolalela ngoba sekunokudideka okukhulu okuningi okuvelayo like njengoba sikhala ngokubulawa kwabantu ngabe wesifazane ngabe wesilisa ngabe yingane ngabe yi-rape lakhe ephehlelweni kuhambisa ingane yakho niwazi ukuthi uyothwasa uthola ukuthi lapha yasifika isilala nalomuntu othi uzoyithwasisa kuphi ephehlelweni yadingeka siye phansi ngoba mawuthi uyabheka manje wonke umuntu useyisangoma uthi lesangoma esigcineni ogcina ungasiboni ufika umuntu uzokuthiwa uyothwasa ngelanga ukuthi date it is uyambona futhi lo muntu akasaqhubeka umazi wenzani kuphela into ozoyibona yande ezweni ukubulawa kwabantu ilama body parts nalokhu ke kobulili obufanayo ngokwami kuyangena la ku GBV because mina ngikhula ngivele ikhona lento akukho kusho kufikayo although noma manje ke sekuzama sekwanda because of this government okwazi ukuthi no laba bantu abadedelwe bengalokhu beyifihla bahlale nathi emphakathini umphakathi ubazi ukuthi nabo babantu nabo banelungelo lokuthi nabo baphile into abayifilayo bona emzimbeni wayo ngicabanga ukuthi konke lokho ngiyavumelana nawe ngoba mawubala abantu abagcina behlukumezeka omunye uzagcina seyeke umsebenzi tot even la isebenza khona uyahlukumezeka bambiza ngamagama lawa angafuni ngoba ngenye indlela nje nathi ngokwesintu ikhona lento ukuthi umuntu ombizi ngesici sakhe yabo okunye engibona ukuthi futhi ngivumelana nawe ngithekileka section 75 ngiyayivuma inomqondo yikho ke phela ukuthi ke siphila kulelizwe okuthiwa imali azikho singazi ukuthi zishonaphi esilande oba sikho kwi-house as debate honorable Masiko njengoba sesichazela ukuthi ishonaphi imali okay enye into engiyithandile la yile yokuthi ake sibheke nasey'koleni yonke le minyango nayo ifakwe la kodwa-ke bengake ngibheke mina lana ukuthi eyamaphoyisa nganoma ibalile okay because if mase sikhuluma ngalento ngalomnyango nangale bill esikhuluma ngayo khona lana gcina sithinta khona social development dingeka la no human rights uyadingeka ngoba mawuthi uyabheka la amaphoyisa social development, no land. Usengifuna ningibuze ukuthi why uland. Yindlela abantu bakithi obabonayo indlela abahlala ngayo. Kwabo yona iphathi yokugcina abantu bakithi behlukumezeka. Because mawuthi uyababheka baminyene, abanye ugcina sebesebenzisa mhlambe indawo lakhe ama-toilet ahlangene lakhe kokhaya mnandi. Uthola ukuthi abanye khona la eduze. Kukhona enye nje into adivela kulezi insuku lana eLimpopo. La kutholakele khona ukuthi ingane kamakhelwane. Mina nje bengafuni ngisho nasey'koleni phansi kuyafuneka even ama-primary abe la makhansela afunakala ma-prime. La uthola khona ukuthi ingane kamakhelwane ize like next door, not even bahlukaniswa yindlu. Ithi izocela lena ethi bazodla bacela bayodlala. Wathi ubaba lengane ona 58 ingane na 8 years. Ngena ngaphakathi ukhona la. Mayingena ngaphakathi ingane wavala umnyango baba. Wathatha ishethe begqokile wayiqinywa wayibulala o wayirape, wayithatha wayiqinywa wayibulala. Angithi manje wena makhelwane wakho lezi ngane ejwayele akulula ukushesha wazi ukuthi ingane yakhe la. Kodwa ingane yakhona igcina itholakala kamakhelwane. Ngiqonda ukuthi nanento yomhlaba esilo sakhala ngayo inayo ilokhuza input kulento le yokuhlukumeza ngoba abantu bahlala idlidli baminyene. Yabo. Kanti mhlambe nje abantu babezokwakha bekhululeka uzokwazi ukuthi house number bani lapha house number bani kunenda open space. Lana umuntu wenza into khona la aphinde khona lana uyayizwa lonto la ama case maningi lana. And namajaji mase sesithi sikhuluma ngalento majaji imanje siyadingeka. La kuthiwa nje khona kune meeting noma mangabe sihamba senza lezinto nayo abekhona kaphendule ngoba kunama case lana othola ukuthi umuntu ureshiwe athi maye lapha akuthiwa kuyena especially la udayisayo hayi vele wena ngithi vele wena udayisa ngomzimba. Ama case wonke la wesiwazi akhona maphoyisa mayifika lana court lama case agcina yekwe angabi nandaba wena ubungolunye uhlobo nawe futhi bakubukela phansi kubona yini inkinga na. Laba bantu abakaze kube khona laba bazohlaliswa khona. Enye ke sengigcina amabhodi lawa adayisa utshwala la khipha ama license otshwala. Siyamfuna lo muntu okhipha lawa my license otshwala ngoba khona lana masikhuluma ama university khona lana ade ngisendelwe khona uthothi kune university enotshwala bonke inhlobo katshwala. Umbuzo wami benza ndo batshwala lapha yana utshwala nama drugs. Ezinye izinto lana ngithi kofuthi mase sesiqonde ngempela ukulwisana nalesihlava esihlukumeza abantu besifazane abadala youth abakhubazekile nalaba ama sex workers nalaba bawubulili bufana. Ifuneka yonke leminyango ibe khona ikwazi ukuthi ike iphendule ukuthi mangaka ama case akhona ahlezi ngoba ukukhuluma ngeke kusize ngalutho. Yes. Yabona nje ibhodi lekhipha ama license katshwala ikisichazele ukuthi if isikole lesi i-crash le isonto le indawo ka-government imnika kanjani i-license lo muntu ukuthi akwazi ukuvula le tuck shop. Yes, ama-drugs umuntu masemanjiwe nawo yini lo muntu singezwa kuthiwa ugwetshiwe. Mhlambe siyokwazi ukuthi silomnyango sikwazi ukulwa. Sikwazi ukuphumelela. Ngoba cha shema ngifuna ukuhamba amanga. Bayaphela abantu bakithi siyaxoxa sinotshe. Angiye ingakho ngize ngibe ngathi ngithini ngibonga nje khona isikhathi la kwafika amanye case yala. Kuna ingane zayiphumelela khona uthola ukuthi yareshwa abantu amakhalati amaningi yagcina lo ngane ithi sisindile kanti sisizwa ilokhuzana umuntu kanti lo muntu uyoyibulala inqoma yaba ama-pieces. Nalapho ibuyela kule yama-tavern avulwa 24 hours. Futhi uma uwabheka lama-tavern avulwa ezindaweni zabantu abamnyama. Kwezinye inhlanga ngeke wabona. Ongiyibuza ukuthi yini lenkulu kangaka elusana nabantu abamnyama ngoba namanje kufa kwabantu bakithi abamnyama most ilaba ama-unnatural. Akekho nje kuthiwa lona ulokhuzana ufe ngoba kufanele. Yibhamu. Why zingaqoqo? Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Dr. Vilakazi, thank you very much for your input and your presentation. We are going to allow now Zane's presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Angiyazi lento ukuthi ngizoyifaka kanjani Sithandwa but nje into eyodwa. Ngifuna umhlaba wonke uyizwe if sikhuluma la Dr. Vilakazi. Khona lolu hlelo ukuthi sizokuthola. Lolu hlelo luthi sizokuthola South Africa yonke especially abantu besifazane. Kufanele engabe siyasukuma siyalwelana siyalekelela lapha ngoba izingane zethu zamantombazane yabona lo mntwana omhlanje behleli la eduze kwami bayachashazwa abone umuntu emshela angifuni ukusho bangifuni ukuthi si racist ngoba sizwe leli lakhulele esithi thina siku democracy kanti umshelela ukuthi yena akwazi ukuthi azongena ngakudayisa ama drugs youth yala eSouth Africa ngikhale chairperson today is Tuesday ngomgqibelo Saturday ngakhala inyembezi ingane ezifundile zamantombazana zingene shi kulezi dakamizwa ama drugs so makuvela lolu hlelo lolu lokuthi sizokuthola kodwa manje uyi-threat lo muntu lona uXolani Khumalo nathi thina South Africa esifelwa zingane zethu ngoba phela zingane zifile akekho umuntu ongafundisa ingane ayingene euniversity qedwe ithinya kube khona umuntu oyilandela khona euniversity ukuthi nje abulala ifuture abulala ifuture yayo kuphela ubulala nefuture yalelizwe lethu ezinye izinto lezi ufuna sikhulume ngazo lezi ingane ezigcwele emgwaqweni ukuthi thina ensilewe kususile silomnyango lo kanye nani nithini ngazoba angikuzwanga uyibala lezo zinto kuyimanje uXolani ungezwe kuthiwa unjani ufile ngoba into evelayo amaphoyisa uyakwazi ukusebenzisana nayo kodwa kukhona abanjani abangafuni kulwe nami lama drugs thina ke sikulomnyango Mina I wish ukuthi ngelinye ilanga esibuyele kule nto yalamakhosikazi aka 1956 athi never nalawa masha mashele ematsheni ayochitha utshwala. Ngiyabonga.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Kaula.
Sorry,
Maponopono.
Honorable Chair, sorry, there were questions online. I'm not sure if I should respond, but through your chair.
Okay, but don't respond to things that we are still going to deliberate on. Just respond to what you've presented, so that at least I give a guidance to honorable members on how are we going to deal with this. Because in fact, our focus is this bill is about establishing a structure that will look at issues of gender-based violence and femicide. And we're looking at, we're affording the opportunity to organizations to come make your oral submissions, so that there's a portfolio committee. When we deliberate on these things, at least we would have taken most of the things that you have presented as organizations, individuals, and other political parties, so that at least no one is left behind. That's why we have ensured that we have this extra day, because we listened to what we have presented. And I thought that Upinki will also take an opportunity to come and make a presentation, but she did not make that request. Yeah. So, but thank you for those of you who came today. You can respond, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. There was a question, I think from Ukero, I can't remember, online about members of government departments as part of the committee, if we can speak to that, which is why I think we are suggesting ex-officio members. And I want to link this response because the question is linked to the question of PFMA and the costs. Honorable members and Honorable Chairperson, the issue of cost may not necessarily apply here, because we know that if you are working for government, you are not remunerated in terms of the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act, but you may be reimbursed for transportation to go to a meeting and so on. So that is not going to have a hefty financial implication to this council. And also ex-officials from other councils, honorable members, remember those councils are already governed by PFMA and they have their own budget. So people who come as ex-officials from those councils or from government departments do not have an added financial implication to the council. Remuneration will only apply directly to members of the council, who probably are going to be those 15 or 13 executive committee members as outlined. So it doesn't really take away what NSP has provided. So I just wanted to speak to that. Honorable Chairperson, ngizoma nje lapho ngihlonipha isikhathi sakho ne-committee. Umama Kaula covered a lot of things that we had in mind when we were suggesting Section 76. Sibonga kakhulu, Mam Kaula.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vilakazi. You can stay if you want to listen to other presentations. Now we call upon you, Kosatu, to make your presentation.
Good afternoon. Sorry, good morning, Chair and members. Let me just share. We can share online as well. We logged in if you want to. That makes it easier. We can just share it on the link. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Okay. And thanks, Chen. I think also just to thank members for giving us space as COSATU, just to share our views and making additional time available. Chair, I think COSATU, we're here because obviously our members, well, like the rest of society, is affected by the issue of gender-based violence, of femicide, but also our unions and our members have a particular interest on the issue of workplace sexual harassment and violence and so forth. So I think, Chair, we want to say as COSATU, we welcome on the tabling of this bill at Parliament by the department. We support the bill. We had participated quite extensively on it and engagements with the department at NEDLAC. I think we did appreciate the open spirit in which the department undertook those engagements. And hence we do feel a sense of ownership and support for the bill. So I want to say, Chair, we support the bill in full and with one proposed amendment. And I think we want to urge Parliament to pass it before the end of the 6th Parliament. We do appreciate, Chair, that we might think that elections is far away, in 12 months, give or take. But in terms of the parliamentary program, we really have about 6 months left. And of course, we have the NCP side of the leg. So we appreciate the time. It might seem like a lot, but actually it's very, very little time to get through. So hence we're quite keen to support Parliament's expediting it, etc., without cutting corners, obviously. I think, Chair, in terms of our support, look, we believe the bill is long overdue, an intervention by government to really, I think, as you were saying a minute ago, Chair, to ensure a coordinated strategy at all levels of the state against what we think is a pandemic of GBV and femicide. I think, to our shame collectively as a nation, we've seen this pandemic really growing each year. And I think we want to take ownership as COSATU and collectively society, that collectively all of us, society, government, we've all failed really to defeat this pandemic. And I think, Chair, we do want to appreciate that we have various laws, including, as a previous presenter had mentioned, very progressive amendments to the laws last year, the 3 GBV Acts. We have the resources, we think, to a large extent, not sufficient, but we have some. We have strategies, but often we find these are very poorly coordinated. And I think the fact that this bill tries to remedy that by saying, can we have a single body to oversee and to hold various role players accountable for their responsibilities. So I think that's going to be a positive step forward. We also want to say, Chair, as COSATU, we think this is a developmental planning bill. It's not going to resolve everything, but it's putting in place a foundation block to how do we elevate the fight against GBV and femicide in a more coordinated manner. We want to support as COSATU its provisions in particular around the objectives, which would speak, and they're straightforward and obvious, but we think they're correct, about facilitating a coordinated and a structured multi-sectoral approach, and also one which includes relevant stakeholders, which I think is quite critical in terms of preventing, eliminating, and also responding to GBV and femicide. And of course, this can't be a government-only approach. Society, the churches, business, trade unions, everybody must be involved. I think we also want to support the clauses with regards to setting short and medium and long-term priorities along, in line with the NDP, the medium-term strategic framework, the budget cycles, etc., the national strategic plan on GBV. And I think we also want to support the provisions providing for the establishment and the maintenance of a platform, which we think is critical for sharing information for best practices and how can we really enhance our fight against GBV and femicide. So we think it's going to be not just a question of government speaking to society, but also society coming with its own views and contributions. I think as the other presenters have shown you, there's a lot of rich ideas out there. But Chair, I think from our side as COSATU, we think all of these provisions are critical to ensuring a coordinated approach and specific targets for GBV, not just platitudes, across all of government institutions, and not just simply a Department of Social Development or the police, etc., but everybody who has a role to play. And of course, to include a broad section of civil society as well. Then, Chair, just in terms of the functions, again, we think that the functions are correct. Developing a national strategic plan with indicators, critically ensuring resources are allocated so these objectives can actually be met. Really trying to ensure the coordination of the implementation, monitoring its implementation, evaluating, etc. And of course, critically to report on progress to government, to cabinet, and also to yourselves as members of parliament and representatives of society as public reps. So I think we want to support, also just getting towards the end, the establishment of the council. There's a lot of discussion at NEDLAC about it. What is the definition of civil society, etc. In terms of NGOs, community organizations, business, trade unions, etc. We wanted to raise for members' consideration one proposal from our side that we think, and yes, in the definitions under civil society, it includes labor, but we thought, Chair, it's worthwhile to look at, can we elevate that to be a distinct component on the council, and really primarily, Chair, for one reason. So we wanted to have the voice of workers heard, and that's fine. But I think to want to specifically elevate the issue of workplace harassment, workplace violence. Often we focus on gender-based violence and assume that's only an issue of community, people being attacked on the trains or in the neighborhoods, etc., at home. But I think often we neglect as society, business and labor, all of us, the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. So last year, Parliament signed or ratified rather with Cabinet Convention 190 of the ILO on workplace harassment and violence. So I think she's really trying to elevate that specific kind of focal point to the work designation for organized labor. There, it might just also help to ensure it, and also, Chair, to hold us accountable as well as business and labor. What are we doing at the workplace on this front? So in conclusion, Chair, we want to just say that we support the bill wholeheartedly. We think it's progressive, it's long overdue. We think it will be critical towards ensuring a more coordinated response to GBV and femicide. We're very keen for Parliament, and we know Parliament will do so, given the efforts this committee has been doing, expedite the bill and make sure it's passed before the 2024 elections. We wouldn't want to see this bill being rolled over, etc. And of course, lastly, Chair, just to consider our proposal about having a designated labor inclusion on the council, just to raise the issue of workplace harassment and so forth. But so that's our presentation in a nutshell, Chair. Yeah, I think let me stop there and thank members for giving us space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kosatu, for your presentation. Any questions from members? Masiko, Machetsi, Boni. Okay, Honorable Masiko.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let us also appreciate the submission of Kosatu, hoping that the recent written submission has been made and submitted to the committee secretariat, and one wishes to further engage with the submission that has been made by Kosatu. I think Chairperson Kosatu is raising an important element on the representation of the labor union, specifically dealing with workplace harassment, because I think it's something that is in the main part and parcel of a major contributor to gender-based violence in the country. And it's one that we seldom ever deal with, because most of the time we focus on issues of gender-based violence and femicide, dealing with the harassment and killing of women, mainly in the home and community environment. I'm just within the structure itself, Chairperson. The reason why I'm asking is because within the structure, it proposes the council to be constituted by a 13-member body, and with representation from the different, obviously, civil society organizations and government. Now, in terms of the representation of the labor formations, is there a solid proposal on how we would get a singular member or maybe two members in terms of how will the labor formations coming from the different areas organize themselves to ensure that there is one representation from that will be able to accommodate all the labor formations? Is there a solid proposal on how we get to the identification of that individual who will sit on behalf and represent the labor formations? Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Masiko. Honorable Machesi.
Thank you, Chair. I won't have any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Pony. Honorable Pony. Honorable Kero. Honorable Masondo.
Thanks, Chair. Can I pass? Thanks for the opportunity, but can you allow me to pass? I for now, I'm covered with what has been raised by my colleagues. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Carol. Honorable Masondo.
Thank you, Chair. I will cover, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Kaula.
Ngibonge Chair, ngibonge presentation kumhlonishwa wakaKhosathu. Ungixolele Chair. Khona la siye sithi size sibathole ke sibabuzwa ba kumnandi ukukhuluma but ukwenza abantu abafuni ukwenza. No la Chair, ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi ngokwazi kwami iKhosathu angithi imela abasebenzi. Ukuhlukumezwa if sikhuluma nge-harassment sikhuluma ukuthi mhlambe emsebenzini umuntu kuze athole umsebenzi kufuneka agwazelwe agwazele lowo muntu othize makuwesifazane funeka azalale naye lonto ibiza kanjani ayona enye yama harassment ngoba mase ngaphakathi sengasafuni ukuthi aqhubeke nokulala naye uzobe sephelelwe umsebenzi. Okunye kunama case lana amaningi lana o Cape Winelands emaplazini njalo South Africa. Uthothi isebenzi abaqasha abalandeli imithetho kaGovernment ukuthi fanele bahole emalini babaholela imali ongeyona. Nina njengoKhosathu nithini ngoba egcineni labo bantu bagcina begqoshwa bephelelwe umsebenzi. Ko Shoprite kunama case amaningi othola ukuthi imanager ilwana mhlambi ize igqoshe umuntu imgqoshela ukuthi emalini yonke yosuku uthema icash apha washoda u2 kodwa mayi extra akaze amgqoshe nokuthi amlwisela ukuthi wenze ufaka udayi ekubeni emtshela akamtshelanga ukuthi angifuni ukufaka inwele angifuni udayi. Akuyona i-harassment leyo na ngabe nithini ngalabo bantu nalama agent ke agcwele umhlaba wonke ingane zethu ifundile ziqedile koma university kodwa ingane igcina manje idlala ama agents mhlawumbe uthola ukufanele ngikho just ukufanekisa ngihola ufana ngihola 10,000 lana mina ngisezukuhola 10,000 uzogcina sengihola le mali ethandwa iagent. Siyakubona sekungenela manje even nako nurse sekungenela nako dokotela nako thisha nako ma clerk onobhala elokhuzeni nako makhoti. Ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi njoba nawe uzamelana nawe uzongena kule bill esikhuluma ngayo uthini ukubhekelela lezo zinto noma nje nifuna ukuphasisa imithetho kodwa le mithetho ningakwazi ukuthi ilandelwe phansi ukuthi iyenzeka yini na. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation from Khosathu. I just want to highlight the fact that I always notice that when it's time to talk, we are often very good at talking, but when it comes to working, it's a different story. In my understanding, Khosathu stands for workers. So my questions and my comments are based on that understanding. I want to understand the concept of harassment, in particular to cases that relate to when women are subjected to behavior in the workplace where they have to sleep with people for jobs. When the women get these jobs on the basis of having to have slept with people to gain the employment, they have to maintain the jobs by continuing to sleep with these people. So I want to understand, is this not harassment? Once the women refuse to continue sleeping with these people, they lose their jobs. On the issue of farm workers, mostly we understand that in the farms, employers do not follow labor laws. The workers on the farms are very vulnerable, as when it comes to their salaries, their bosses make the decisions haphazardly in terms of how much they want to remunerate them for their services. What is COSATU doing and saying about this? It's a prevalent issue, particularly in the Cape Winelands. Another example of harassment and ill treatment of workers is at ShopRite. There are many cases where workers are unfairly dismissed for allegations of stealing money. And also they are often dismissed for frivolous things such as dyeing their hair. So I want to understand, what does COSATU say about these cases? Another issue I'd like to highlight is the issue of agents. There are many agents in this country. You find that our children are educated, but when they have to find jobs, they have to rely on agents. The agents are the ones who determine how much people get paid, and often this is very exploitative in nature. This issue of agents has also targeted certain professions such as nursing, teaching, and clerks. So I want to understand, in terms of what COSATU is saying, and as a vanguard of the workers, what are you bringing in terms of this bill, and are you prepared to do the work to liberate workers who continue to be victims of exploitation in this country? I thank you.
Okay.
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks to members. Yeah, I think to Honourable Masiko, yes, no, we've done a written submission to the committee. And look, even though we had a lot of engagement on this bill at NEDLAC with the department, we thought it's also good when government tables progressive bills, even when we support them, to also say, yes, we support them. Because often at times you might just hear from those who are opposed to it, and to not that we're saying anything is perfect, there's always ways to enhance, to improve, etc. At times even to compromise is fine, but to also say we know we support this bill. We know it's not a magic wand, it's not going to stop GBV tomorrow, but we think it's an additional tool to take the struggle forward. We will have mistakes, etc. And I think, Chair, also why we've raised the issue of sexual harassment and violence in the workplace, because Honourable Masiko is right. We're often all neglected, to be honest, all of us. It might be because it's not yet, as I remember saying, so much in your face, or because also workers, maybe perhaps the biggest workers are just simply in a very disadvantaged position of power at the workplace. We have an unemployment rate of 42.4%. Workers are scared to raise their voice, even to exercise simple rights like the right to leave, paid leave, or maternity leave, etc., because they fear that, well, if I exercise my rights, the employer will just replace me tomorrow, and I won't find another job quickly. But we think, Chair, it is important to have a spotlight on the issue of sexual harassment at the workplace, because we've seen it at every workplace. There's no workplace in the country which doesn't have it. And we think if you help put the spotlight, we'll hold employers accountable, even those who are good employers, but to make sure they also deal with managers, HR, at the factory floor, at the workplace level. Put pressure on the Department of Labour to have more inspectors, make sure the inspectors are much more on the ground, visible, etc. But then when they go to the workplace, they don't just go and have coffee with a manager, but they go and engage workers in a safe space, engage the shop stewards, etc. But even to hold us as unions accountable as well, because our unions also reflect all of society's ills. The ills that society has around GBV in the unions, just like it's in every other part of society. So it's also good we also hold ourselves accountable as well. So, Chair, I think our thought around the council representation, and we're glad it includes civil society, but I thought it's just important, if you want to have a specific spotlight on workplace harassment, to say, okay, can we make sure that there is a Labour rep? Masiko is right to say, how would you then select that person? It's not easy. We think a simple way, which is often done in other government statutory bodies of similar types, that the department, when it calls, or the minister, when the minister calls for nominations, Also then simply says send a letter to NEDLAC, where the 4 trade union federations are represented. That's COSATU, FODUSA, NACTU, and SAFTU. NEDLAC then says to organized labor, can you amongst yourselves come with 1 rep? And then it's sent. The positive thing there, Chair, is that because now the rep comes from organized labor, they can also hold that person accountable. Whereas if we just represent, or if I apply as Joe Soap and I go there, afterwards you'll find that I'll say, well, I'm not from organized labor, I'm just myself, I'm representing my T-shirt, I'm not accountable. To whomever from labor might say, but why are you failing to raise our issues, etc., etc. We think the NEDLAC process is a useful one because it's a statutory body created by an act of parliament. You have the 4 federations there, and they represent more than 3 million workers combined. And I think all of them have a vested interest in wanting to tackle this issue, obviously. I think to Honorable Kaula, it's a difficult one because Honorable Kaula is 100% right. We're all very brilliant at talking. We're a nation of PowerPoints. If you looked at all our presentations, you would think, fantastic, this country is very advanced. But the reality is, Honorable Kaula is saying it is not good. You have workers at the retail sector who are physically searched by security guards, strip searched, etc., abused. Honorable Kaula is right about workers who are out of desperation for a job in the public sector, the private sector. We've heard countless stories, are forced to sleep with the employer or the HR manager or whomever. It's a real problem across. And really, we're not dealing with it. I think that the stats we have often really, again, fail to look at the issue of harassment at the workplace. But it's really prevalent across the board. And, we've got positive laws. I mean, so the amendments to the 3 GBV Acts that are passed in September last year did have quite substantial definitions around what constitutes workplace harassment or violence, that, and what are the protections it gives to workers, etc. That it's a workplace grievance if you're harassed at the workplace. It can constitute unfair dismissal. So you have the right to go to CCMA, to the labor court, etc. You have protections, and that's great in English. It's nice English wording. The challenge is Honorable Kaula saying, how do you translate that nice English words into actual action? And if there's one thing in the cities to enforce the rule of law, Honorable Kaula is right. How much more difficult is it for a farm near Uppington, where people won't speak English? They don't know about those English laws. They are scared. So for farm workers, it's difficult because if you're dismissed from your farm, you lose your home. You may have lived there for 3 generations, your grandparents, your kids, etc. You may have a Standard 2 education, so you're not going to find other work. And often you'll find farmers, when the worker wants to join a union, says, hey, get out, you're dumped at the side of the road. So Chair, we amended the Esther Act about 5 years ago, give or take, which deals with the issue of evictions, the Extension of Security Tenure Act, but everyone calls it Esther. So there, for example, on the issue of farm workers, it says that you can't be evicted without due process, consultation, Department of Agriculture must be included, legal representation. You can't be evicted at night, etc. Municipality must provide alternative accommodation. All of those things are great, very progressive, but if you look at the reality of implementation, it's very, very thin. And again, you look at the farm workers, we have about 900,000 farm workers. If, Chair, 5% are unionized, we're lucky. It's very difficult to organize because, members would know when they might go canvassing during elections. It's very difficult to access a farm. The distance is physically 80 kilometers, etc. There's a security fence. There's a gate. You ask the employer, let me in. The owner, because it's private property, are entitled to say, go away, You can get the Department of Labor, it's fine, but it's a process. It's not easy. Our unions, we have 3 unions which try to organize farm workers. SACTU, the Clothing Workers Union, FADU, which is an Agriculture and Food Workers Union, SACAO, which is a retail sector. So they've all tried to organize. Often it's easier to organize food workers in the canning factories, for example, in the Buland and so forth. Those are not farm workers, those are workers in the towns. SACTU, Clothing Workers, has appointed chair, I apologize, I'm going a little bit granular detail. Has appointed dedicated organizers just for farm workers. They've recruited about 13,000 farm workers, but that's great. And there's some progress there, etc. But it's still a drop in the ocean if you compare it to 900,000 farm workers. And again, most farm workers will have no idea the fancy laws we pass. So it's difficult. I don't know what are the actual solutions, except to work more and work harder and work smarter. But I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. Chair, Our unions, and look, our unions have different strengths and weaknesses. Some do very well, some struggle, often because of the nature of the sector, because of the role of labor brokers, etc. But most of our unions do try to undertake education and training with shop stewards, with organizers, with members, make sure they're aware of the rights. But again, Chair, it's difficult when you have an unemployment rate of 42%, and people are very scared of exercising the rights because they know the alternative is unemployment. If you look at the UIF office, which is about 300 meters from Parliament, you will not pass a day without seeing a queue of at least 200 people queuing to receive the UIF payments. So it's difficult. Doesn't mean that we must give up or we mustn't make our effort or we mustn't do better, and we should do better. But it's not an easy thing. But most of unions try to undertake some work. But I think even there, Chair, you know, we have some progress. We have some things which you can't call progress. So at COSATU, out of about 6 national office bearers, 3 are women, including a president, first time. But now when you cascade to individual unions, it's a men's choir, if I can be honest. So you can make progress, but at the same time, we mustn't also hide that we are also found wanting in many issues. So Chair, I want to be honest because I don't want to tell Honorable Kaula that no, everything is perfect. It's honky-dory, because it's not. And even ourselves as unions, we have much more to do. But it doesn't mean that we mustn't try, we mustn't push harder, mustn't hold ourselves more accountable on it, etc. Chair. So yeah, so I think, I mean, that's large issue. Maybe the last issue, Chair, on the issue of agents and labor brokers, it is a huge problem. I think it was the 4th Parliament dealt with the amendment to the Labour Relations Act, which put a time limit to labor brokers for 3 months. The members that time tried to get it from 3 months to 0 months. Well, we were defeated at the end of the day anyway. And look, it's fine. So on the LRA in law, again, you have a limit. After 3 months, it must become permanent, etc., which must give you some sort of security, comfort that you can't easily be dismissed. But again, we know in reality, you have about more than 1 million workers who now work for labor brokers, whatever we call them, what do you call it? Temporary employment services, etc. They have rights after 3 months, etc. But again, in reality, it's not the case. So yeah, so there's much more work that trainers need to do, including COSATU. There's more work that the Department of Labor needs to also help. But also the organized business too must also come to the party, because they often would lambast government for not doing this or that, which is fine, it's right. But they must also look inside their own house, because often, Chair, you'll find that employers will agree at NEDLAC to various progressive laws, but then they keep quiet when it comes to engaging their own members to say, what are you doing as the hotel or the retail sector or agriculture, construction, etc., to translate those commitments into actual practical action. So, Chair, apologies if I digress a little bit, but I think Honorable Kaula raised a lot of important issues. I wanted just to try to do some justice to her important questions. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, members.
Ngiyaqosa sithando sami. UCOSATU uthi kade angimhalela nje ukumbona. Thank you very much, Chair. Ngibonge honorable. Ubona ngathi lezinto engiyikhuluma ayithi suka mina ama case esihlangana nawo. Okwesibili nje ngifuna ukuthi ukugcizelela. Ngiyabonga ngoba sukuthintile nalokhu kususwa abantu emhlabeni yabo mhlambe kade besebenza bese kufanele basuke. Ngiyakubonga lokho. But ke kunalento enye othola ukuthi abasebenzi siyakuma election next year. IParliament likhona because amavoti abantu. Siyacela uCOSATU usimele usilekelele emaplazini abantu bayahlupheka emaplazini ngikhuluma ngabasebenzi akuvumelekile bahambe bayoregistela ukuvota ngenye indlela akuvumelekile bayopractice ama rights abo abaqashi basemaplazini. Lento sengiyibone kaningi bekhala abantu bethi siyafisa siyathanda ukuyovota Lapho voter as a member of parliament, as a politician, we don't care which party labo bantu abayovota, but abantu njengabantu base South Africa. Abaqashi abayeke ukuvimba abantu bathama ID yabo bawathathe bawahide kubona. Nganguthi into ngiyibonile iyenzeka la eWestern Cape. Baze babathathe babalayishe bona ngeemoto babaphoqa ukuthi abayovota. If etholakala evotela enye organization. I'm not talking about indaba ka-ESA. U-ACT chair. Yes. Okunye ngizofuna nje ukwazi ungakuphendula manje ungeke. Ukuthi intoho qala kwakungavumelekile umuntu abe i-temporal job. More than 3 months. But in this government, this time, suthola umuntu nje uyi-temporal. Waya. Yabo. Ezinye izinto engizocela sikwazi ukuthi njoba sila sikhuluma ngalama bill zingene ukuthi la eSouth Africa lento yengcindezelo ibe ikhona iminyango ama department athamela abantu bala ayibe segcineni ngoba nofika la nithi sizokhuluma ngalokho nithola abantu abafana nathi sithi okay wayithela msobhe swayini sesila sengibuzile ngendaba amatoho ukuthi itoho why kuze kuphela u3 months umuntu kuthiwa yini uyitoho. Kune case enye nje yase Hawick lapho ugogo na 86 ngangiyeke leyo nto ingane zakhe mawucabanga lo muntu ona 86 baba wakho ekulelo plus amathuna kubo yonke into kodwa kuyimanje kuthiwa kaphume nezingane zakhe kodwa unazo ngoba bafuna ukusebenza la kuthiwa mabayiphi. Akuyona yini na iGBV leyo? Akuyona yini na harassment? Ibuyela kwena Dr. Vilakazi. Leyo ukuthi sometimes the portfolio committee idinga imanje. Idinga abaka justice la. Because kunama case amaningi lana enzekalayo. Kodwa sileyo sithi thina sihlalela abantu besifazane, sihlalela abantu abakhubazekile. Yabo, kunama disable enziwe abaqashi babo. Yingakho ngithi Khosathu siyacela if nimele ama rights abasebenzi asiwabona. Ngigcina ile ama promotion. Asibone abantu besifazana bepromotwa. Asibone abantu abadisable besebenza kungashuthi abaqashwa bona because ongoba le building esikuyona ayinayo lezi zinto zokuhamba ngazi nibiza ngani ngesingisi. Iyouth ikhona ifundile asibone isebenza iqashwa ezibhedlela nilwe ukuthi ngeke kuze kuyothathwa abantu bangaphandle because yo cheaper etwayini cheaper labor. Le ngane kupho why kuthiwa ayifunde zize igcine ingane zethu seyingena kotshwala ingena komatras ezinye zizibulale. Ngiyacela ngiyasihambisana nawe but ezinye izinto lezo ufuna niphushe ugovernment youth yethu abazi ukuthi nansi ama universities sinodokotela sinothisha sinayo yonke into. Ngalokho bemnandi lo sizoxoxa lana nje ama English amakhulu kodwa lana ingane zethu ayisebenzi ngenxa yokuthi nje lo msebenzi awufundele ufuna imali enkulu and ne forms lele apply khona imsebenzi khona into engangothi ngelinye ngifuna sibheke not now lento yokuthi sithi siku democracy kodwa iforms sisasho ukuthi we African we inhloboni funa Ufuna kuphele lelo forms ngoba kumina ngibuka sangathi sekhona lenhleso ukuthi ngeke simqashe lo ngoba le position lento ayifundele uzohola imali engaka. Uyayibona lonto. Ngiyabonga. I'm not fighting, but ngisho into ikhalo zabantu ngisho izinto engizithola kubantu. Abantu abathethelwe bayovota ukuthi uvotela nhlobo ne-organization yi-rights yakhe sikwi-democracy.
Kosatu, do you want to respond to Honorable Kaula? Oh, yeah, okay, by the way, yeah, Maponopono, we need to translate. Okay.
Funda Thembi, ayidlayo Thembi.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to interject. It's just that I've been dying to see Kosatu. I also want to emphasize the fact that these are not my views. I'm merely representing the views of the people whom I represent. I'm so happy you touched on the point of the fact that farm workers normally get evicted and uprooted from their lives when they start standing up for themselves and speak up for themselves in the farms where they work, for the reasons that you have cited. I thank you for raising that and emphasizing on it. Next year, we are going to elections, and this is an issue that is deep to me. Kosatu, please, you need to stand up on this issue. I've noticed that on the farms, when we go to visit people who are staying on the farms, the people there are extremely poor. And the other issue that touches me the most is that they are not allowed to vote. The farmers deprive them of their right to go and vote. They do this by confiscating their IDs or compelling them to vote for a particular organization. And this is the only time that they would be allowed to vote. This is not good, and this is an infringement on the rights of farm workers. I also want to understand the issue of a temporary worker. In my understanding, a temporary worker is not supposed to be a perpetual worker. But in my experience, I find that someone is called a temporary worker for 3 months, but this happens perpetually. It's happening a lot under this government, and I'd really like to understand why it is called a temporary worker if the temporary worker continues to work perpetually. It doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. The other issue that I'd like to raise is that in as much as we are talking about roles that have to do with women, children, persons with disabilities, and youth, is that these issues intertwine with each other. It's the reason why I keep raising them. The necessary departments like that of labor also need to intervene and have a view and a voice in terms of the bills that we come up with, because these issues interlink with one another. I have another case that I experienced of a woman in Howick who was 89 years old. Her whole family stayed on a farm. They lived their whole lives in a farm. So you can imagine if the woman's 89 years old, it means even her other relatives are buried on the farm. So her whole life was on the farm. She was, at the end of her life, thrown out of the farm when there was no longer work for her. These are the issues that are close to my heart and the issues that COSATU needs to intervene and stand up for and fight for the rights of workers, especially in the farms. As I've said before, and I emphasize again, the judges and the magistrates, i.e. the judiciary, needs to also intervene in such cases when they are brought before them, because I find that the justice system lets people down a lot, workers. The other issue is that there are people who acquire disabilities in the workplace. So they come to work as able-bodied and then they acquire disabilities in the workplace. And these issues are often also not attended to. And we need COSATU to stand up for workers, because when a worker acquires a disability in the workplace, it means that they cannot be able to work in most cases. And touching on that, we want to see women and people with disabilities being promoted in the workplace. We want an end to the fact that buildings are used as an excuse not to hire persons with disabilities. The reasoning would be that a building is not fit enough for a person with a disability to work in. This should not be an excuse. Rather, employers should create conditions wherein people with disabilities can work. The issue I'd also like to emphasize, as we have a high unemployment rate in South Africa, our youth need to be employed. I noticed that our youth in majority are unemployed, and it's mostly because some of them are skilled and they do have an education, but because the employers are seeking to get cheap labor from our international and economic migrants, they end up not employing South African youth and taking upon cheap labor instead. This should be condemned in the highest form. It is no use for us to sit here and speak big English while our children, the youth in their majority, are unemployed. And again, I want to emphasize that I'm not fighting, but rather representing the views of the people whom I represent, those being women, youth, and persons with disabilities, and particularly those who are from the poor and working class communities. COSATU, please intervene. I thank you very much.
No, thanks, Chair. I think thanks to Honorable Kaula. I think Honorable Kaula has support across all parties. I think her voice has always been a positive one and raising important issues. And I think it's positive, Chair, because doesn't matter what color our t-shirts are, whether we're ANC, DA, EFF, FO+. I think we should all be aggrieved by the levels of GBV, etc. I think Honorable Kaula's raised quite a few important issues, Chair, in terms of like what does COSATU do around the issue of elections? I mean, because elections are important to everybody, including workers. The work of parliament, of government has an impact upon everybody's lives. Most of our unions will do a lot of work trying to get workers to register, make sure they have the IDs, especially workers who are migrant workers. Many members will live in backyard dwellings. There's the issue of fires, people lose the IDs, etc. We have many workers who also are highly indebted and end up handing over the IDs wrongly to your loan sharks who illegally hold on to them. So that's an issue. We've also tried to have a lot of campaigns to explain to workers why it's important to vote, because there is a sense of apathy amongst people of whichever political persuasion. But we do actually want everybody to vote. No matter who you vote for, everybody should vote. It's important. And sure, yes, as COSATU, we have an alliance with the ANC, that's fine. But we want society at large to participate in elections, because if society doesn't own the elections, it becomes a threat to our sustainability as a country. We want people to hold government accountable, irrespective of which party. There. We'll also do a lot of work, Chair, in our unions on election day itself, transport for workers. Most workers wouldn't have access to private transport, etc., or even to knowing where's the voting station, etc. We'd have workers across unions who would volunteer in different ways, whether it's at a union level or in their political party, or even working at the IEC itself to assist in running the voting stations. And of course, many of our members actually be working officially on election day, like police officers, for example, defense force personnel, other essential workers, etc. But I think we are quite worried about the voting registration trends, because we see less and less people voting, less people registering to vote, especially young people. I think every year we're meant to be registering about 1 million new voters when people become 18, etc. And the pool is shrinking. We have a difficulty of people who migrate in search of jobs from Limpopo or the Eastern Cape, wherever, to the cities, and then don't re-register. And it becomes a crisis on election day when people want to go and vote and they don't understand that, well, you've registered in Mount Aleph, you're now in Cape Town. It's a challenge. You deprive yourself of a vote, etc. We do try to do a lot of work to explain to workers, like truck drivers, for example, who know they'll be working on election day. It's fine, but you have the right to the early voting. So trying to do more and more work there to encourage people who are going to be working to come out and to do that. It's a difficult issue because on election day, we'll get a lot of complaints from workers, farm workers, workers who work at restaurants, at bars, at petrol stations, separate from the essential workers like healthcare workers who know they'll be working and who are a bit more aware of the rights. We have issues with truck drivers, etc., taxi drivers who are not aware, so we haven't done enough work around voter education collectively. So it is an issue. We have workers who might work at call centers. They only get off at 8 o'clock at night. By that time, it's too late to go and vote. So we have a lot more work to do as COSATU, not just amongst our own members, who's about 1.6 million, but amongst the other 40 million workers who might be organized, might not be organized, etc., especially amongst young people. We've had a lot of engagement here, and I think, to be honest, we've failed on it to engage with government on having what you call a non-trading holiday for election day. To say that on election day, workplaces should be closed, except for essential workplaces like police, health, the obvious ones. It's a difficult thing because right now there's no legal provision for it. Government Department of Home Affairs has agreed at a political level, yes, something must be done, but they've yet to come with a bill to say, how can we have a non-trading holiday on election day, which is that everybody should be allowed to go and vote, etc. We think we do need more practical ideas checked. Say, for example, is the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Voting times on election day enough? Because you have some workers who go to work at 5 in the morning. So perhaps we should say from 4 a.m. to midnight, for example. Workers who come home at night only get home at night, 9 o'clock, etc. There's the issue that they get home, they want to feed the family, feed the kids first before voting. So there's a lot of logistical issues. But I think it needs a collective discussion. Do you want to say, for example, we have elections over 2 days? I don't know. We know the logic of having election on a Wednesday to avoid people going home to the rural areas on a weekend, etc. On weekends, people tend to socialize, to drink, etc., not be worried about politics or elections. So it makes sense to have election on a Wednesday, but we need to see how can we assist in improving voter turnout, because a lot of workers, Honorable Kaula says, struggle on the issue of farm workers is a huge problem. And often the only transport for farm workers to get to the voting station is from the employer. So there is an intimidation. And again, farm workers may not always be aware that your vote is secret. No one can see how you voted. And in many of our rural towns, these are very small communities. You'll find the voting district population in a rural voting district might be 800 voters. In the city might be 3,000. So there's a lot less privacy, so to speak. I think the other issue is, Chairman, so look, I think for us, Chair, on the last issue on the farm workers, I think for us, the real solution for farm workers is that farm workers must own their own land and be assisted by government with regards to building houses, having basic services, etc. Because that's going to be the only protection from the threat of evictions. Otherwise, we're going to have this discussion and we're never going to fix it. The LRA says temporary work is 3 months, but the reality, Chair, on the ground, Honorable Kaula is saying, it's abused. There is another problem with the LRA that there's an exemption for companies which have less than 50 employees who are exempted from that 3-month thing. So most companies, most workplaces will have less than 50. Not all of them will have, like Parliament, which has got 3,000, for example, or give or take. Your SMEs will be less than 50. So there's a huge gap in the labor laws around it. I think the other questions, Chair, look, we're hoping this council will really help to coordinate government strategies, as Honorable Kaula is saying, not just from the Department of Women and Children, Youth, and so on, but employment and labor, health, the education departments, because this problem is across institutions. I think the court issue is a particular crisis, Chair, because you might find it might take you about a year from laying a charge to getting your court case being heard in court. You might have 12 postponements. When you go to court, the victim or the complainant is sitting in the same benches as the accused. Now, if you're a young woman and you've been harassed or attacked by members of a gang, you're not going to go back to court after the first appearance. You'll be too scared. You live in the same community, they know where you live. So we think the court issue, such GBV cases should be prioritized. We should really take the the progressive commitments in the 3 GBP Act about a safe space, etc. Is it really being implemented in the courts? It's not in reality, or in the police stations. I think the last issue is, Chair, around disability. So look, it's positive the Department of Labour is now trying to elevate the employment equity targets, because again, we're finding many sectors, not all, but many sectors were falling far behind where we should be 29 years down the road. But if we really want to make an issue on disability, it's about making sure young people with disability have access to education. Many don't. That there's issue of transport is accessible. That is on saying buildings being accessible, but not just for persons using wheelchairs, but also people with visual disabilities, hearing disabilities, and so forth. Often, and one wants to preach to all the work government has done around social grants as a huge achievement since 1994, but often we tend to assume disability is about social grants, and it's not. It's about access to education and housing and transport, the whole spectrum of life. And I think the last thing, Chair, we know we've veered very far off the bill, but I wanted to appreciate Honourable Kaula's good questions and comments. The issue of migrant labour is a ticking time bomb. And yes, the LRA says that, for example, the migrant labour, whether you're documented or not, you have the labour protections. Reality is a different thing, but it's a ticking time bomb, because you'll find employers, be it in the restaurants or retail or farms or construction, transport, will hire non-documented migrant labor because they know they're desperate. You are fleeing from Zimbabwe or wherever. You are desperate for any job. You won't ask for the minimum wage. You won't join a union. You will not complain about any abuse. So they exploit that desperation. That's one problem. But then also it's creating a ticking time bomb in townships where we have a very high level of unemployment for young people, over 50%. And the low skilled jobs like restaurants or petrol stations, which should have gone to absorb young people from the township, is now being absorbed elsewhere. So that's creating a friction. That's why you see the outbreak of xenophobic violence now and then. It's going to continue to happen unless we find a way to resolve it. I don't know, Chair, for the life of me, how we will resolve it. Because to be honest, to be fair to government, other countries are outsourcing their failures to South Africa. So Zimbabwe's government is very happy to outsource its failures and say, well, people move to South Africa, but it's going to collapse. We can't sustain it. I don't know what the solution is, Chair, because if you look at other countries in the world, they have the same difficulty, maybe not the same level. The real solution is to create jobs, to grow the economy, but you can't just grow South Africa. You have to grow Zimbabwe, Mozambique. You have to rebuild Somalia. And I don't know what can South Africa do about Somalia, or what can we do about Bangladesh, very far from our shores. And there is an element of real abuse of human trafficking, etc., as well. And it's a sophisticated criminal syndicates, but it's a difficult thing. But if we don't do it, it's going to explode in our faces, and we're going to all be found wanting. So thanks, and apologies for talking too much, but Honourable Kaula, I think, is very passionate and raised a lot of useful issues. I didn't want to, but I hope I responded to them adequately, Chair. But thanks, Honourable members, and Honourable Kaula. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that clarity and the input you just made now. If there are no other questions, honorable members, I think we are done with COSATU. Let's allow the next presenter. Call to action. Ms. Kosana.
Sorry, Chair. Ngizocela angiphe through wena, Chair. Honorable, ngizocela ungiphe ikhadi lakho, business card, because lo gogo engikhuluma naye Mr. Gerard wamshaya icase yakhe ise court, but ayihambi because asazi noma iyagwazelwa yini. Ngiyabonga.
She wants me to interpret for you. She's saying, please, can you give her your business card? And there's a case of
Same
the Granny Molive. Her case is still pending, so she'd like you to assist because it's stagnant. She was beaten by her employer.
Okay, Mr. Gerard.
Mr. Garrett, the employee, the farmer.
Case yakhe isecourt.
Case is in court.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Can I begin the presentation or is there the things that?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead,
Thank you.
Ms. Kisana.
Thank you very much. Good morning, honorable members. Is it still morning? Nope, it's noon. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Kisana, and I'm here representing the Call to Action Collective, who submitted a written submission to the committee in collaboration with Sonke Gender Justice and IPAS. And basically, I just wanted to draw the attention of the floor back to the issue of the tagging. And I just want to relate that issue to obviously the resolutions that came out of the second presidential summit that was held last year, and also the NSP itself, since that's our guiding framework, policy framework. So the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide in South Africa sets the parameters and architecture for the development of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. The founding document states that the institutional arrangement and implementation modalities that must characterize the constitution of the National Council. This institutional arrangement is premised on a multi-sectoral approach and therefore requires that the board reflect a commitment to a flexible and light structure at the center, with key operational mechanisms in place to respond effectively and urgently to arising needs. So on the 2nd to the 3rd of November, during the presidential summit, it was resolved that there needs to be a fast tracking of the legislation to obviously ground the National Council, placing emphasis on the composition of the council, ensuring that government departments are resourced to respond to GBVF and the funding is ring-fenced, creation of the GBV fund as prescribed in the NSP on GBVF, multi-sector implementers such as government, business, volunteering, and activist organizations that are listed as implementers of the NSP and GBVF, outlining the roles of and responsibilities of those champions, which are the presidency, the IMC, and the council, integrating Chapter 3 of the NSP on GBVF into the legislation and intergovernmental framework, the multi-sectoral nature of the response, establishing transitional arrangements for the NSP on GBVF beyond the current timeframes, and provision for tracking who is implemented. While the draft bill attempts to provide a cohesive structure to the radical approach taken in the implementation of the NSP, it does not sufficiently provide for a body that will be independent and non-partisan in its nature as prescribed. It is essential that the bill reflects the objectives of the NSP. Although the bill attempts to present the multi-sectoral nature of the council, this is not explicitly reflected and thus needs to be augmented. The comments submitted in this oral presentation seek to highlight such gaps and resolve any inconsistencies that we believe exist within the bill. So the issues that I'm going to be drawing the floor's attention to are mainly the tagging of the bill, decision-making and governance structure, accountability, reporting, and transparency, and the establishment of the fund and its architecture. To begin with the issue of the tagging. In the title description of the bill, it refers to the bill being introduced to the National Assembly as a Section 75 bill. We submit that this is incorrect. While the bill provides the precedent prescribing the legal test for tagging a bill, it has failed to consider the shared competencies and suggested hierarchy of the objectives of the bill itself. On page 58 to page 60 of the NSP, an organogram is provided on the proposed structure of the National Council. And I want to just spotlight that organogram, because herein the role of each stakeholder is defined. From this organogram, it is noted that the provincial legislature has a significant role in the implementation of the NSP. Section 42 of the Constitution prescribes the composition of Parliament, which consists of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Section 42, subsection 2, further stipulates that both constituencies participate in the legislative process in the manner set out in the Constitution. Schedule 4 of the Constitution, as highlighted, provides for the parameters that give effect to this undertaking. These are heeded as concurrent competencies. Concurrent competencies mean that both legislative bodies have the power to institute legislation on issues pertaining to those in Schedule 4. These are concurrent because the Constitution allows provinces to institute their own laws and regulations to implement set policies as per the needs of that particular province. In this regard, provinces must be involved in the making of legislation that substantially impacts them, as stated by the test for tagging a bill. This was not only stated in the case law referenced within the memorandum attached to the bill, but in the subsequent case law where such issues of tagging have arisen. In Democratic Alliance v. President of South Africa and others, the court stipulates that the tagging of bills is indeed subject to the competencies that it substantially affects. Where the areas affected have, to a substantial extent, concurrent competencies with provinces, then a bill must be tagged as a Section 76 bill. The reason for this is that while national legislation will always take precedence, as stated in Section 136 of the Constitution, provinces must be involved in the making of laws that will extensively impact them. Therefore, the tagging of the bill as a Section 76 does not invalidate the operation of national directives, as the law clearly sets out. Provinces must still prescribe to the guidelines of national directives as they take precedence. However, as the organogram presents, it is necessary to include local government in the architecture of the bill, not as passive role players either. It is indeed for this reason that provinces need to be actively involved in the making of legislation that impacts all tiers of governance. To rely on the trickle-down effect is insufficient, especially given the track record of the implementation of policies in this country. What happens is that local governance is often left out of the fold, leaving it in disarray and without any guidance or accountability. If the structure is to take the bottom-up approach as intended by the NSP, the tagging of the bill as a Section 75 becomes insufficient. Section 44, subsection 2 of the Constitution stipulates that Parliament may intervene by passing legislation in accordance with Section 76, subsection 1, concerning a matter falling within a functional area listed in Schedule 5, which is the area for local governance. Certainly, those areas that affect local governance also sit within the ambit of Schedule 4 areas, thus furthering the case for the tagging of the bill as a Section 76 forum. The issue of tagging would not be a contentious one, precisely because a bill can be tagged as both if required. It must be taken into consideration that the bill being drafted is a radical deviation from the bills that precede it. It requires a multi-stakeholder engagement architecture of a legislative framework that ensures each tier has a fiduciary duty to implement the NSP as per their mandate. We therefore submit that the bill should be tagged as a Section 76 due to its role as the middle pathway between the two spheres of governance. In relation to the composition, decision-making, and governance of the bill, Clause 1, the first provision of the bill, which is in the provides the definitions within the context of the bill as stated, reference is made to the interministerial committee. If this is not defined under this provision, accordingly, the IMC is a key custodian of the National Council, which needs to be reflected accordingly by the bill. In addition, the IMC, although constituted through the NSP, has no publicly available legal framework for its mandate. Its inclusion in the bill without any such records invalidates its role as part of the matrix of the National Council. The terms of reference of the IMC needs to be legally consolidated so that their role is explicit within the council's structure. The IMC plays a key role in the effective functioning of the National Council and what it seeks to achieve in terms of governance. The issue of accountability herein shadows the lack of accountability mechanisms undergirding the current bill. Within its provisions, the bill is silent on an accountability framework that would enable the council to operate as intended by the NSP. The lack of an accountability framework renders the bill ineffective as the issue of transparency arises, as is the case with the IMC and the public consultations that have been said to have happened, but there isn't any evidence to suggest that these have A, been taken into consideration within the bill itself, and B, that they were written and entrenched in the bill as was stated by the public itself. So therefore, there is no evidence showing that there's this kind of transparency within the engagement when it comes to the National Council and how it needs to be constituted. In the second presidential summit, it was taken as a resolution that an accountability framework will be established in collaboration with civil society. It is this framework that was therefore intended to be entrenched in the provisions of the bill in order to ensure the effective implementation of the work of the NSP. An accountability framework therefore needs to be drafted before the bill can be consolidated. These gaps need to be rendered before the bill can be passed as legislation. The first provision, of course, states that the National Council has hereby been established. Yet there are no preceding clauses that stipulate explicitly in what manner it is to be constituted. There needs to be a clear articulation of the various role players and a limitation of their different positions, including their duties and responsibilities. By merely noting that the National Council is hereby established, the bill leaves out a large portion of the key stakeholders in the exact hierarchy or order of representation. Therefore, the bill needs to expand on how the council is going to be constituted by noting all the stakeholders it seeks to constitute and the exact structure this will take as reflected in the NSP. I want to move on now to clause 5 of the bill itself. As previously noted, the functions of a council cannot be clearly defined if the structure of the council itself is not explicitly included in the bill. It is in fact for this reason that it is crucial that the bill be tagged as a section 76 bill instead of 75. The NSP has specifically allocated functions to provinces and local municipalities, which are administrative in nature. In this regard, the outcomes set out in the NSP substantially affect functional areas listed in Schedule 4 and are not incidental. For example, in Schedule 4, the concurrent competencies that substantially affect provinces and even local governance, which falls under Schedule 5 of the Constitution, are at least over 10 areas that require administrative action from the lower tiers of governance. Policing is impacted at both levels, and so is health and education, which swings back to the issue of intergovernmental coordination. As stated earlier, the Constitution stipulates that where a bill impacts Schedule 5 competencies, then the tagging of the bill needs to be a Section 76. Section 6(1), subsection 1 identifies the composition of the board of the council as being 80% women in its representation. However, this is in conflict with the values of the Constitution. The equality clause in Section 9 of the Constitution stipulates that no individual shall be discriminated against because of their sex or gender. Therefore, the articulation of this diversity clause is interpreted incorrectly, as women are intended to be interpreted as a placeholder for the marginalized. What this means is that 80% of the board's constitution must be inclusive of all articulations and iterations of gender. That is, 80% of the board must be representative of the LGBTQIA+ community, including gender non-conforming persons, people with disabilities, youth, children, and women. Therefore, we request an amendment to reflect that the total constitution will consist of at least 80% of individuals from marginalized communities that includes the cohort of groups that I just mentioned. Moving on to Section 6, subsection 6 of the bill itself, on the appointment of the chairperson and deputy chairperson of the boards. The bill states that the minister must appoint members for these positions. We submit that this should be amended. Our submission is that the board should be co-chaired by one representative from civil society and a representative from government, mirroring the structure of the Presidential Summit Planning Committee, which was a successful structure as it ensured that both sides were able to participate and be transparent with each other in doing what is needed to do to obviously fight the scourge of GBV in this country. And so, again, I want to direct the floor's attention to the establishment of the fund and architecture. The bill is silent on the establishment of the National GBV Fund. Therefore, we submit that the reference be made to the NSP for its effective establishment. We submit that it be specifically stated that a National GBV Fund will be established with clarity on the architecture of the fund and how it is to be constitutional. We further recommend that a minimum of 65% of funds be channeled into project implementation and activities designed in accordance with the implementation of the NSP GBVF. In lieu of this, there should be an introduction of a mandated project implementation budget into the funding structure to ensure funds are sourced for the implementation activities. External fundraising initiatives should be disclosed to the council to ensure that there is no duplication of requests from the NSP GBVF Secretariat and that the stakeholders for the implementation activities. This will ensure that the fund remains an accountable vehicle of transparency as per the accountability framework that should be established. Lastly, the bill vaguely refers to regulations but fails to expressly provide for these in the bill itself. Consequently, there is no clause that expressly provides for the drafting of regulations within a specified time frame. It is our submission that the failure to indicate when regulations should be drafted for the implementation of the bill within an X amount of time, for example, 6 months, it is likely to have an impact on the rollout of the bill. Ensuring the regulations are expressly provided prevents undue delay in the implementation process. I submit to you, honorable members, and please, I apologize for the background noise. It's just that I have been sitting here for quite some time, and so my batteries have died. I hope that you are able to hear me and that you are able to hear my submission as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kosana. Honorable members, any clarity seeking question? Machesi, Honorable Machesi, Honorable Boni, Masondo, Carol, any questions? Honorable Kaula. Okay. Silence means all members are covered. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
This was the.
I don't have any. I have no questions, no clarity from.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Boni. Honorable Nomsa.
Chair Member Piri, I'm fine. I passed. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Right.
I'll also pass, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Masondo.
Cover, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Kosana, for your presentation. You will be informed also, all of you, the presenters, and on when are we going to deliberate on our report. But I think it will be in next term. Next term, because on Friday, on Thursday is our last day. Yeah, it's our last day. If it's during recess, we will inform you. But if it's after recess, we'll inform you. But thank you very much for your efforts of coming to the committee. And all the things that you have raised are noted. We will also engage with the department on how have they conducted their consultation process. And so that when we move forward, we know that we have done our level best. I still say, Dr. Vilakazi, other people, if they were having interest, they should have used this process. Because when we adjourned last week, we did mention that anyone who have interest to come and present to the portfolio committee, they must come. Yeah, but we didn't get much. So from our side, we have done our part. Even COSATU was also informed. So those that will be saying the portfolio committee did not do justice in terms of our consultation process, because these meetings are open. We ensured that these meetings are open to the public. So any member of the public, if they wanted to raise something with the committee, they should have made the chair aware. We are live streamed. It's broadcasted on YouTube. And what else? DSTV. And then what else? Sorry, Facebook. So the public is aware that we are having these hearings. But thank you, because you've also submitted your submissions. Ms. Kosana, you submitted your presentation, Mosangit. Kashifa was showing me your presentation, so we are fine. So thank you very much, honorable members. Is there anything that you want to raise, honorable members, before I adjourn the meeting? Okay, the department must also submit responses to all submissions by August, ne? Not to miss. By August, Fanigin submit all your responses with regards to all the presentations that were made, were submitted to the portfolio committee. Whether
Oral and written.
Oral and written submissions, so that when we start our work, Nelly, you did forward submissions to each department, the written ones. Yeah, you need to give them, so that at least you do diligence. Yeah, unfair. So you'll get all those submissions, written submissions. And if maybe there are things that you did not capture well, feel free to request for recordings, so that you can go back and listen to what was raised in the meeting. Yeah, also respond accurately and promptly. Okay, thank you very much, honorable members, and COSATU, and those that are here. Dr. Vilakazi, you are welcome. There's lunch. Yeah, because it's cold, so we didn't want you to feel more cold. So you're invited to our lunch. Honorable members, thank you very much. We are going Saturday. Mr. Mvaba, thank you. And Nelly, thank you. When invitation, we told early notice we'll be having this meeting today. Unelisa told you on time, but our meeting, even last week, you heard our meeting are physical for this bill. So lento yenzile nje, you didn't do justice to Mam Kaula. Ufuna ungena ku online kanjani? Umuntu interpretela kanjani? Uyabo akuhlebele nini? Mawufuna ungena visual. So it's not acceptable. So please check with your Uneliswa when there are notices of meetings. Guti, is it physically or is it visual? So that Mam Kaula becomes effective and productive in the committee. Don't disadvantage her.
Yes, Chair, because I'm going to take this matter in court. I'm going to take this matter in court. You know which court I'm talking about? My organization, EFF. You are abusing me.
Yo, yeah, but so now it's like Mam Kaula is saying me, I'm abusing her. When me, I will make sure that those services are there for her all the time. So it's from your side where you don't do justice to her work. So those services are needed by Mam Kaula. Please ensure that those services are provided from your side.
My apologies, Chairperson. There was a miscommunication. Thank you.
Funa Mam Kaula asho ukuthi accept apology yakho bese mina ngizosho after yena. So that ungazophinde nangalo mhlolo.
Well, Chairperson, with due respect, I didn't want to have a dialogue with you. But since Mam Kaula says I must clarify, initially, the information came out as if this meeting will be in a Zoom platform. Hence, on the roster, I was deployed to interpret virtually. It's not my making, but it's the authorities above me. But subsequent to that, as I was waiting for the link this morning, it's only then that I learned that no, I need to be physically present here. Hence, I say there was a miscommunication. Yeah, Mama.
Okay, apology accepted. Next time I will verify and check Guti, what does the notice says? So that we don't get these conflicting messages. Because Mina, I was informed when you were informed that our meeting is physical.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mina enye into engibuka ola. Indaba iphezulu wa-interpreter. One day, fanele ke ubona Mr. Gerard or Gabriel. Ihlezi kuduma lo mlungu owashawa lo muntu. So I guess akatshelwe because ngifika la eParliament mina ngasho ukuthi mina ngikhuluma iphi language ngoba ngisuka kubantu. Phansi ngifuna bazi zonke izinto asobe ngitshele zona kwi-constituency ngiyazenza ngiyazidlulisa phambili. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much.
Ngiyamxolela yena kodwa ngoba yena unalento yokuthi uthi naye unamuntu amphethe phezulu. Ngiyafuna sibabone laba bantu ngoba la eSouth Africa lento engiyenzayo mina i-rights yami. No one can force me to ngikhulume language engafuni
Mam
ukuyikhuluma.
Kaula, accept apology, Mam Kaula.
Thula wena. I accept ilokhuzana apology, but not in.
No, thank
Chair,
you very much.
Chair, I would like to come in if it's possible before you close.
Okay.
Chair, I'm also just as concerned as Umakaula, how she's been treated, but not only, when it comes to interpretation, but also the documentation. Does she get enough a briefing before these meetings, or even the type of documentation that she receives? Is it translated in Zulu so that she can actually prepare herself properly for the meetings? I just want to find out if that has been done, because then if that has not been done, it has to be done, because she cannot come and only find out when she's in the meeting, what is the meeting about, when she was given English documentation. So, and it's also given the fact that you guys are going to Germany also, I think she needs to be really briefed on for each and every meeting, what is going to be expected of her, like the kind of engagement that she must contribute to, and I just feel like, maybe we are not, as Parliament is not really giving her the support that people like her really need. It's not only about sitting in the committee room and being interpreted, but also the documentations that she receives, the briefings that she receives before the meetings, they have to be in Zulu as well. Thank you, Chair. I think maybe, I don't know, I don't think it's for us to do that as a committee, but I think it's something that we need to raise with Parliament, to say that she needs people like her. I mean, Makaulu is not going to be the first person that comes into Parliament that is only, that speaks vernacular. It must be a practice that is done for all members of Parliament who are more conversant in their own languages, and they have to be assisted, because those are all official languages. Thank you. And also, you must have a safe trip, Chair. All the best to all the members that are going to Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Machetsi. Mam Kaula will be well briefed by us, especially for our trip. And then I have taken note on the things that you just said in terms of documentation, which then I will have to find out from Parliament on how do they deal with that, and maybe make recommendations that I think there's a need for them to do a translation in terms of a language for our documents, because it's important. Mam Kaula attends our committee meetings all the time, and she does her work and she participates in the committee, irrespective of how documents are written, but she does participate and fully, and she understands our issues that we're dealing with. And sometimes when I find time, I do call Mam Kaula and speak to her on other things. And she does also do that. When there are things that she doesn't understand, she calls me as the chair, and also Nelly. So she does talk to Nelly sometimes when there are things of clarity that she's seeking. And then, but maybe I need to look at that, especially the issue of documents on how Parliament treats members who are want to speak their own vernacular languages, so that they're not, closed out by the system itself. And I think this is one matter also that you need to take to multi-party women caucus in trying to address the needs of members. Honorable Sheriff, Masiko, and all of us, we need to talk about these things in that multi-party women caucus, so that our members, not only Mam Kaula and other members, because sometimes it's not fair, for other members not being able to participate fully in committees because of barrier language. But thank you very much, honorable members. The meeting is adjourned.
Are we not getting our lunch while you are eating yours? Long live the chair.
For Bali exam.